All right, we should be live here. Welcome back to the Choose Your Character series, the title of which I did not know for the last interview. But here we are interviewing members of the Norwalk Gamer Symphony Orchestra. I'm, of course, Mike, and my guest today is Sam. Sam, how are you doing?
I'm doing all right. Thank you for asking, Mike. How are you doing?
Hey, I said I was asking the questions here.
What?
I'm doing okay. It's been an interesting day. Today is the 4th of August, and Tropical Storm Isaias has just rolled through, and so it was a rainy and very windy day here, but
Oh yeah.
I seem to have weathered that pretty well. How about yourself?
Same. It was a lot of fun. I went out to go and recover my houseplant at one point. And anyway, yeah, it was fun standing outside in the wind and everything.
Did the houseplant survive?
I think so.
I wandered out at one point to get my mail, and one of my doormats had flown down to the bottom of my stairs. I have no idea why it flew that far and why it flew only that far. It was very interesting.
Physics,
Um,
man.
yeah, physics and weather. How does it work? So, Sam, obviously, we've gone over the first question in our little agenda here. What is your name? Kind of an obvious one. But Sam, tell us a little
Yes.
bit about how you found the Norwalk Gamer Symphony Orchestra and your experience in joining it.
How I found the NGSO. Uh, I am a founding member of the NGSO.
So not only did you find the NGSO, but you founded the NGSO.
Indeed. Uh, our primary founder is a guy named Brian, who is currently the president of the NGSO. And Brian, I met because he and I were working at the same company.
Okay.
And Brian told me that I met Brian on a train ride one time. We both just happened to be on the same train going down to New York City. And I asked, I tried to get to know him a little bit because he was a new guy in the office. And he told me that he was a musician. And I said, oh, me too. And we got talking about what our musical interests were. When he mentioned that he had this background in this video game orchestra stuff, I was like, man, I bet you could find a bunch of people. I bet you could find 100 people who'd be interested in this at our office. And eventually, a little bit later, he wound up putting out flyers for signups, and that was it. We founded the group.
Yeah,
We
and
did not get 100 people, but
I think maybe at our largest size of the orchestra, combined with the largest audience we've had, we might have hit 100 people. But so
no, we've exceeded that if you count the audience. The largest number of people in the orchestra has been 28 we had in one performance, and we've had audiences exceeding, I think, 200, I think.
And in addition to just being a member and playing an instrument, which we'll get to, you hold a position of leadership in the orchestra. Is that right?
Yeah, I'm on the board of directors, and I am the secretary of the orchestra, which means I'm supposed to know how many people are in the orchestra at any given point in
Which
time.
is why you can pull out an exact figure like 28 instead of just
Yeah,
an
exactly.
estimate. Awesome.
Yep.
Well, so your story of sort of how you found the NGSO is sort of the story of the NGSO. So that's really cool to hear.
Yeah. I've only missed, I think, 3 rehearsals in the entire group's history. So,
And
like, I've been there
we're very upset at you for that.
for.
That's
Well, yeah. So
sarcasm, audience.
I've been there for a lot of the group's history, if not most. I don't know.
Or all of it. I guess
Yeah.
accepting, Brian sitting down at home and saying, I should do what that Sam kid told me.
Well, yeah.
So, all right, let's pivot a little bit and let's talk about your gamer tag. Down below my video here, and of course below Sam's video, there are name tags giving our first names and our usernames. Sam, yours is Betulafo. Tell us a little bit about what that means and how you came to select that username.
Yeah, so it's a neologism of 2 roots. Betula is a Latin root that means birch, like the tree. And phobe is this Greek root, afraid of, right? Somebody who's afraid, or acrophobia, whatever, these different fears people have. So it means someone who's afraid of birch trees, if you'll allow me to mix a Greek and a Latin root together.
Okay.
Um, But yeah, so I'm not actually afraid of birch trees, but I discovered when I was in college that I am allergic to them, and so I thought it was kind of a fun uh, name to describe myself.
Yeah, I feel like that still fits. I mean, if you describe a material as hydrophobic, it's not literally afraid of water. It just sort of is repelled by water. It doesn't mix well with water. So I think that still fits. With my
Right.
very uninformed, very uneducated, top of the head language justification skills, it makes sense to me.
And that's what I came up with in college too, because I also knew the term hydrophobic reactions in chemistry, but
Mhm.
I didn't know exactly. It doesn't exactly mean what I want it to, but whatever, it's close enough. That's
Yeah. All right. So obviously, we're talking about the Norwalk Gamer Symphony Orchestra. You're a founding member. In addition to your leadership roles, you must maybe play instruments or provide musical talent in some way. So why don't you tell us about some of the instruments that you play?
yeah. So I play a handful of instruments,
You got
primarily in
you
this.
got big hands if you're going to describe this list as a handful.
So primarily in the group, I play the oboe right here.
Okay.
I can make quick sounds if that's desired right now, or we
Oh, we
can
could
do
do
that
that
later.
later in the show.
All right. I also play in the orchestra occasionally the bassoon, which
That's the big boy.
yeah, it's harder to get on screen here all at once, but and
Yeah,
make sure I
you need to take several steps back to show it all at
don't
once.
and make sure I don't hit the ceiling with that.
Yeah.
So I also play the bassoon. I also play the soprano recorder.
As part of the recorder ensemble, which Mary demonstrated her recorder, which is really your recorder last time.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, but
Details,
soprano
details.
recorder I also play. I also have played the guitar in our group a little bit.
I can think of you've played it for at least two pieces, right? You played it for when we did The Last of Us. You
Yep,
were one of the guitarists, and I played the other guitar. And then didn't you play in Bastion a couple times when we've done that?
and yep, and I'm also playing in our new Zelda piece
That's
uh,
right.
from uh, from Link Between Worlds.
Okay. All right.
But we haven't
That's
performed that yet. So.
yeah. So that's four different instruments. Surely we're done. Surely this list
No,
isn't
no.
half over. Oh
So I
yes, of
also play the
course.
bass guitar, but but I haven't played bass in our group really yet, except for one time that I was filling in because our bassist was missing.
That must have been
Uh,
before I joined.
no, it was just recently. I played bass on one of the Chrono Trigger boss battle rehearsals we did.
Oh, really? I don't remember
Yeah,
that, but that was a long time ago, especially in 2020 terms.
I think it was in February. So
Yeah,
yeah,
forever ago.
yeah, exactly. So I play bass guitar as well. I don't really play this instrument, but I have a little children's accordion.
Can you please tell everyone the story of the child prodigy?
Yeah, so I suppose I should just show. So this instrument is called the Child Prodigy.
Perfect.
Um, the Child Prodigy I found for $30 in a pawn shop in Chicago. And I impulse bought it because I was thinking. So at the time, I was listening to a lot of Steve Reich music,
Okay.
which we might get to a little bit later as well. But I was listening to a lot of Steve Reich, and so I was thinking of like his pulse music that he makes, and I was thinking like, man, it'd be cool if I could record some of my own pulse stuff with a sound like this. And so I was like,
Hmm.
so anyway, I bought the instrument intending it to be kind of an auxiliary instrument to help me in my own music composition and stuff. But I didn't really wind up using it for very much until we needed an accordion part for an NGSO song, and so the Child Prodigy sufficed and filled that role.
It certainly sufficed.
Yeah, it did not exceed expectations.
It met expectations, maybe on the bottom end of meeting them, but yeah,
it met expectations for a $30, 50-year-old, uh, thrift store accordion. A
yes.
thrift store children's accordion. It maybe met those expectations.
It may not have created great music, but it created a great story. The legend of the
Yeah,
child prodigy has maybe lived on past its use in the NGSO. Uh, I
yeah.
like that story a lot.
Well,
So we
and
got
we've determined that whoever plays the child prodigy is the child prodigy.
yes, exactly.
So we've had other people play the child prodigy as well. Nick played it once, and I don't
More people that I got to get Nick on. I got to get Nick onto this show. This show that has one episode and is now recording its second episode.
know. Yeah.
Uh, so you got a couple other entries on your list of instruments. Do you have those handy?
I'd have to get up real quick to go grab one of them. I forgot to keep it next to me.
You can do so if you would
So
like, or we could just mention them.
I'll do it real quick.
All right. So just for complete transparency, Sam and I both have a
All
document that we are working from, an agenda that we are working through. So I'm cheating. I can see his list of instruments. You can't, but now you can see this instrument.
Yeah, so I also have a baritone ukulele, which I play a lot here at home, but it doesn't keep tune very well right now.
Hmm.
I think I need to get the pegs adjusted. But anyway, so I have a baritone ukulele that I play a little bit, and the
Okay.
last instrument on my list is I've played mandolin for the NGSO, but I do not own a mandolin.
Okay. So you cannot demonstrate a mandolin because you do not have a mandolin, but you've played
Correct.
one. You played one that we borrowed from a friend at church. Is that right?
That is correct.
Okay. Yeah. And you played that on. I think I'm trying to remember what the piece was called. It was from The Legend of Zelda: The Wind Waker.
Yep,
Uh, shoot, it was like Hylian Highlands or something like that.
that's right. Yep.
Okay. You do have one more thing listed here, and I don't know if you're going to
Yes.
bring it up or not, but
I have sung for the NGSO. Yeah, a little bit.
yeah. So we don't do that many vocal tracks with the NGSO, but when we do, you are a capable contributor to our NGSO choir.
Yeah, I when I have the opportunity and we decide to make it an ensemble, right? So we did a piece from I want to say Ori and the Blind Forest recently that we allowed for kind of like just ensemble vocals. Anybody who wants to sing, join in. Uh,
Hmm.
I think it was Ori. It might have been a different
I
piece.
know we did that for the Legend of Zelda: Twilight Princess Hyrule Field.
Yep, yep.
Day and night. Ori, not to brag, Ori I think was my solo.
Well, but we changed it for the recent season because we were doing it as a duet between you and Lexi.
Okay, yeah.
Uh, and then I think that when we added Lexi in, we had it at octaves at that point, and so we just decided if anybody wants to join in, just go in.
Yeah, that's a cool piece, and I think adding a choir part as opposed to a solo part would really expand kind of the feeling of that piece. But that's getting kind of off into the weeds. That's a whole other discussion.
Maybe a little
Uh,
bit.
someday when I've run out of people to interview, maybe I'll have a history of the NGSO podcast where we just kind of reminisce on old pieces we've played. That would actually be
Maybe
really
so.
cool. Someone who's listening to this live or watching this on YouTube, write that down. All right. So, you play just a few instruments, just a handful of instruments for the
A
NGSO
few.
in your personal life, which is about, let me get, it's like 9 times as many as I play. So I'm impressed. Let's switch gears a little bit. Obviously we are talking about symphony orchestra, but this is a particular kind of symphony orchestra, a symphony orchestra that plays music from video games. Let's talk about video games.
All right.
I've asked Sam to list some of, not necessarily his top 5 or top 10, just a small collection of his favorite video games. So trying to keep this low pressure. So Sam, what are some of your favorite video games?
All right. So when you asked me this question, I tried to kind of do. So I've been playing video games for a long time. Playing video games for like 2.5 decades.
Hmm.
So I've experienced with a lot of different games throughout a lot of different periods of time, a lot of different systems, a lot of different genres, and I tried to kind of pick like a favorite game from different eras or types of games or something. So to give a kind of broad picture here.
Okay.
So, uh, so one of my favorite games, which is a very recent modern game, I think, is The Legend of Zelda: Breath of the Wild
Right.
for the Nintendo Switch.
Yeah. March. I If I think hard enough, I'll get the right date. It might have even been March 3rd of 2017. Maybe it was a little later in March.
I don't remember the date, but I got it opening day, or
Yeah,
I went to the midnight release of the console and got it in line and stuff. So
yeah. So this might be my favorite game, but I'm not the one being interviewed. Tell me what about this game do you like? What makes it stand out so much?
Legend of Zelda: Breath of the Wild was it was so I went through kind of a generational gap playing games. I played games on I played games on the PS3,
Hmm.
which came out in 2006. Although I got my PS3 in '09. But I didn't get a new console to play games on until 2017 when the Switch came out. So I kind of went a long time, kind of a gap in modern games.
Yeah,
Um, so playing Breath of the Wild was like a huge breath of fresh air for me, sort of like, oh man, like this is a like new cutting edge video game, sort of. I mean, I know that there are going to be people out there who are like, the graphics are terrible, it's not cutting edge, but like on the topic of the graphics, I think they're beautiful. The art style in it is fantastic. And Breath of the Wild, it was like a perfect sandbox game, sort of. You just sit down, you can walk around and just admire the scenery, walk around, collect plants. There's all kinds of different things you can do in the game, as well as the main story, of course. Um, yeah, there's just so much about it. The aesthetics of the game, visually as well as from an audio sense, I thought were really, really appealing. I loved the music every time you entered into one of the shrines.
mhm.
I loved the way the shrines were broken up, so that it was these little puzzles that you would just kind of do one-offs of. I know some people complained about that too, that it wasn't like the old Zelda dungeons, but I thought the shrines were a wonderful concept. Um, yeah, I don't know. There's just so many positive things I can say about the game. I loved that you could color your like. I love that you could like collect the different suits of armor and then like color them differently, so you can make some like cool color combinations. I liked. I don't know. I liked meeting all the different villagers in the different places.
Yeah.
Yeah, there were some parts of the game where I would just go hang out, like just go like walk to the place and then just sit down, just kind of watch the scenery and listen to the music. It was very nice.
Yeah, especially, around like sunrises and sunsets, it could be an intensely beautiful game. And so there were definitely times, when I played through Breath of the Wild, I definitely sort of had an objective in mind. I was going for the story, I was going from beginning to end, but even so, there were still times where I said, "Nope, we're watching this. We're watching the sunrise or we're watching the sunset. It's too beautiful and I have to appreciate it." Um,
Yeah,
Really, really impressive game. Really
yeah.
impressive.
Yeah, every level of that game was well made and well thought out. Like I don't, I feel like there was no point in the game that I was like ever disappointed with any aspect of it.
Yeah. Um, I could spend a lot of time talking to you about Breath of the Wild, talking about its game design, talking about, the legacy of Zelda. My name might belie the fact that I'm a big Zelda fan. But maybe
Yeah,
let's move on. Let's talk about some of the other games on your list. So, what's this next game?
sure.
It seems like maybe we're going back in time actually with the way you've
Yeah,
ordered this list.
that was how I ordered it. I ordered this as a trip backwards through time. So, in the year 2009, I believe, it might have been early 2010, but it was either '09 or '10. A game came out for the PS3 called Dragon Age Origins. Dragon Age Origins very quickly became one of my favorite video games of all time, and I've played through the game multiple times to experience it as different. Oh, so it's a fantasy RPG.
Okay.
That's based on like a Dungeons and Dragons type game engine. And so I've played through it numerous times to get the experience of playing through as a different class, right? As a warrior or as a rogue or as a wizard, basically.
Are those the only three options, or are there other options in the game?
So there are only those three, but each one of those has four subclasses that you can simultaneously like get abilities in, and then there's also like an ability tree that lets you customize yourself further.
Okay.
So you only have three classes to choose from, but you can kind of mix and match all the other stuff to make relatively customized characters.
Cool. Well, that sounds awesome.
Yeah, so
Um,
Dragon Age is like it's such a cool game because the game designers for it actually spent a decade working on the setting of the game, right? Working on the story, working on the history, the lore behind the game's setting. They spent literally 10 years as their full-time job working on the setting and story for that game before game development started. And so, like the technical part of the game development.
Mhm.
And so that game in particular, the first one in the series, is very well thought out, very immersive, very interesting. It's just a super fun game to play.
Okay. You mentioned it was the first in a series. How many games are in the franchise?
I actually have no idea. I think there are like three main ones because there's Dragon Age Origins, Dragon Age 2, and then Inquisition. But I've never actually played either of the sequels. Most people agree that they both fall short, very very short of Dragon Age Origins, and both of them are different genres of games. So in Dragon Age Origins, you have I said it was a D&D type system.
Mhm.
So you have a party of, I think it's 3 or 4 characters at a time that you can kind of switch between and give them different actions to do in combat. But Dragon Age 2 leaned towards more of like an action style game. That didn't have like classes or anything like that. I think it was, anyway. I don't know the particulars because I haven't played these games, but I think that they are very different, and most people think that they aren't nearly as good as the first one.
Okay. So, because they're different genres, do they not interest you as much, or just you never got the chance to play them, or had you
Yeah,
just heard they were disappointing and skipped?
hearing that they were disappointing kind of disincentivized me from seeking them out and spending the
Okay.
energy on them. So maybe someday I'll get around to them, but
Fair
yeah.
enough. Well, let's jump a little bit further back into the past. What's the next
All
game
right.
on your list?
I should have listed years on here so that I could remember for sure. But anyway, in the early, oh well, I should go. Well, so the next game on my list here, another one of my favorite games of all time, is called Phantasy Star Online. So Phantasy Star Online is a game that's come out for numerous platforms, including Xbox, GameCube, and originally on the Sega Dreamcast, where it debuted in the late 1990s. So Phantasy Star Online is a kind of an early console-based MMO RPG. You can only it's again an RPG, and you make your character of. They have 12 different classes you can choose from in that game. You can only go into a dungeon with a team of 4 people. So that's not super massively multiplayer. But the online lobbies they could have dozens or hundreds of people walking around in the lobbies. So that was the massive part of it. But this is the late 90s, so you got to be a little more forgiving, I think.
So maybe the first M in MMO stands for moderately multiplayer online.
Maybe so. But Phantasy Star Online, super super one of my favorite games. Because I think that it, not for the online purpose. I've actually never really played the game online. So I've primarily played it local multiplayer because they enabled a split screen multiplayer version of the game. And playing that with friends was just a huge amount of fun constantly. We would make our own teams, which we would call guilds, PSO guilds, and we would try and traverse and beat the game with our new teams. And it was just a ton of fun, camaraderie, excitement. And one thing I should mention, I want to go back and mention this about the 2 previous games on the list as well. Breath of the Wild is a game that's relatively light on music. It has music there in certain parts, like the towns, there's music, but for most of the game, it's pretty sparse, right?
Mm-hmm.
Dragon Age Origins, I found that game to be kind of not the most interesting, so most of the time I played it with the soundtrack off and sound effects on, but I turned the music off and then I would sometimes listen to other music while playing Dragon Age.
Okay.
Phantasy Star Online is kind of the same way. Phantasy Star Online, although I like a lot of the music that's in that game, when you're sitting down playing it for hours on end with your friends trying to beat this dungeon, you kind of get tired of it a little bit. So most of the time when I would play PSO with friends, I would also turn the music all the way off and listen to other music on a CD player or something.
Gotcha.
So that was another aspect of the bonding experience playing PSO, is that you get to bond not just over this video game and teamwork and all that stuff, but also listening to music with your friends.
Although if correct me if I'm wrong, but haven't you tried to arrange or started to arrange one of the tracks from this game for the orchestra to play?
That is true. Yep.
So at least there's that one song or one piece that you appreciate.
Well, there's several actually.
Yeah.
I like a lot of the music in the soundtrack, but like I said, like when you're just sitting down and playing hours on end, it's not the most variety. So
Yeah, it takes a very special, like a very good soundtrack to be able to sort of be interesting for many, many hours at a time.
When you're listening to the same song over and over because you're just in the dungeon, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, the whole game structure is super simple. It's basically just 4 dungeons, and so and that's the whole game. 4 dungeons. There's like 2 tracks in each dungeon, so it's not a whole lot of variety.
And then you've got, I think, like the town. Isn't there like a central town? I don't know. I don't even know if it's a
Yeah,
town, but the thing that functions as the town.
yeah,
You
yep.
got
Your
your
hub
like your
area,
your title screen, your main menu theme, and your
right?
credits theme.
But
Ta-da! You
that
got
you
a
listen
soundtrack.
to, yeah, but you listen to that so much less than the actual dungeon
Yeah, for
music.
sure. Yeah, you and I played a little bit of this game, not necessarily hours and hours on end, but
No,
you brought your game over to my place and we played a little bit of this, and I got a feel for
yeah,
this game, and it was a good game. It was fun. But yeah, I definitely I think the thing I appreciated the most was spending time and hanging out with you playing the game. So I
yeah,
can
and that's the
definitely
thing
get
that I
that
think.
aspect.
Yep, that's I think what PSO does best.
Yep. All right, so let's talk about the next game on this list. The last one that you don't have surrounded in question marks.
Yeah, so that's because I don't. I just wanted to, I didn't want to insist upon taking up a whole lot of time. I don't know how we're doing time wise here, but
Yeah, we're fine.
uh, so the next game on my list is a game called Way of the Samurai.
Okay.
Way of the Samurai is a very interesting game. I described it, if I had to describe it with a genre, I would call it an anachronistic, idiosyncratic, open world, choose your own adventure 3D samurai fighting game.
Really, the anachronistic, idiosyncratic, open world, choose your own adventure, 3D samurai fighting game genre is just so just full of games. It's really just, and I don't really know that they needed another entry,
But they got it.
but they
So
got it.
yeah, so this game came out for the PlayStation 2 in the early aughts, something like that. And it is such a bizarre game, but it's a ton of fun. Basically, you just make some slight aesthetic adjustments to a samurai character, and then the game just dumps you right into the middle of action, and you have to figure out what you're going to do. You're presented with an ethical dilemma in the first 5 seconds of gameplay, and you have to decide where you stand ethically in this scenario. So that's the beginning of the choose your own adventure aspect of it. And
Mhm.
basically, the game just tells a story over the course of 2 days in this very small geographic area about the end of the samurai age in Japan. Um, and your character, you get to make a lot of choices that impact how the story changes. And the game is just full of ridiculous characters. There's a samurai who wears like, a leather biker jacket and has like ripped jeans. There's another samurai who's actually an English woman who uses a rapier. There's a samurai who is a black guy with an afro who does disco moves. There's another samurai who uses like a giant like two-handed sword. Anyway, the game is just full of characters that are very memorable. And there's voice acting in it as well, although most of the voice acting is just grunts. And so you learn each character's distinctive grunts, and you bond with them over that. Uh, so you get a lot of like, people will know who I'm talking about if they played the game before.
Shout
So yeah,
out
the
the
game
deep cuts here.
yeah so the game is like it's very very just itself.
Mhm.
It's very silly, but it's also very like dark. It's because it's a fighting game engine. It's very skill based as well, and so you pick up all these different swords that have different move sets. And you learn
Mhm.
how to use these different swords in different scenarios and stuff, and you pick your favorites and you can upgrade them, and it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, and so like a choose your own adventure book, it's really a game that kind of shines when you play through it many times. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly. And so this is yet another game that I most frequently played socially. Even though it's a one-player game, except for there's a two-player mode where you can just fight each other, you can just duel.
There's the
But
fighting game engine.
yeah, exactly. But apart from the duel mode, it's a one-player game. But most of the time when I played this game, I was playing it in a room full of friends, and basically we'd take turns. Oh yes, another thing is the game is super to play through the entire game. If it's your first time playing through the game, it'll probably only take you like 2 hours to beat it.
Mhm.
And if you know what you're doing, You can get through the game much faster than that. So most of the time, when I play this game, we just take turns running through games, basically getting different endings, improving our swords, practicing, just talking and having fun the whole time. So just this is another game I would play very socially with friends, and it is another game that the soundtrack, not really the best. Again, some memorable tunes, but like when you're just running through the game a whole bunch, it's like, we can forget about it. So most of the time on this game, I would turn the music off and listen to other music on a CD player or something.
Gotcha. I believe one time when I was visiting you, I played through at least one path. I don't remember if I played through a second path of that game. And I remember it being fun. I definitely feel like if I were to play it more, I would appreciate it more. Um,
It's a game that grows on you as you play through it, because you learn
yeah.
about all the actions and stuff built in between all the characters, and it's again, the joy of that game is getting to know the ridiculous characters and the fun plot, and getting to discover your sword, the one that,
Yeah.
oh, that's the one that I like.
Yeah, I remember in particular, finding I think there was like a blacksmith who can upgrade your sword, and
Oh
finding
yeah.
that I didn't have enough of whatever resource I needed to upgrade my sword, and so I
Money,
said,
yeah.
"Surely I'll come back here later," and the game was over by the time I, had any chance to do that. So,
It's a
uh,
very short game, which
yeah.
is part of the appeal.
Yeah, I mean, if it's a game that benefits from playing it multiple times, it's probably better that it's short, so that it's not, oh, in order to really experience this, you've got to play this 30-hour campaign 7 times. Like,
Right,
no
yeah.
thanks. But a
Right.
2-hour
Yep.
game 7 times or however many times, more palatable, more agreeable.
Yes. Yep.
We're doing fine on time. There's no time limit here. We can talk about the next two games if you'd like. The
All
next
right.
one, I
So
believe, is one that I've played. So
that's exciting.
yeah.
Yeah, so the next game on my list is my favorite racing game of all time, which is Star Wars Episode 1 Racer for the Nintendo 64.
Now, I do have to quibble a little bit, and I won't push the point a lot. Are you sure it's not
Uh-huh.
episode 1 Pod Racer?
I am not. Um, it could be Pod Racer. I think it's just Racer, but I could be wrong.
But regardless, this is the game where you do pod races, right?
Yes, exactly. Yep.
Yeah.
So this game came out in 1999, the same year that Star Wars Episode 1 came out. And it was the first game, like, my family got a Nintendo 64 with this game.
Yeah.
So this game was the beginning of me playing an N64, which is great. But anyway, this game is a really, really well-made racing game. It's really fun. The controls are tight. The levels are fun. They're interesting. You can upgrade your pod a little bit. I don't know, and it's just fun again because of the variety of characters and picking kind of your unique style, like any racing game, basically.
So I gotta ask, who was your pod racer? Who was your preferred character?
So I think I raced most frequently with a guy named Mars Guo.
Okay.
I think that was his name.
What was his feature? What was he good at?
Mars Guo is kind of like Sebulba, but you don't have to aim to unlock him. So he's a heavy character with a high top speed.
Okay. Yeah, I think my preferred character, when I first got the game, I was 10. And so, I said Anakin. I like Anakin because he's the good guy. So I played a lot of Anakin. But as I got a little bit older and started thinking a little bit more critically about the game, I picked Ben Quadraneros. I believe because he had the
He is the
highest
fastest.
handling. Was he the
Oh,
fastest
really?
or the handling?
I think he's the fastest because he has the
Okay.
4 engines, and so they gave his top speed like a ridiculous value.
Okay.
So yeah, he has some
maybe it
other
was
drawbacks, but
yeah, maybe it's that he had low handling. So I picked him because of his top speed, but then prioritized buying handling upgrades so that I could compensate for, the insane top speeds.
yeah,
Yeah.
Ben was I played with Ben a little bit as well. Yeah, so Mars Guo was kind of a compromise character. He wasn't
Okay.
as fast as Sebulba or Ben, but yeah.
And let's talk a little bit about the music of this game because
There's another game that I would generally turn the music off.
first of all, how
Uh,
dare you? Second of all, how dare you?
well, the thing is, the music in this game is kind of just like it doesn't need to be there. Basically, they just sampled tiny bits of John Williams' soundtrack from episode 1, so you get Duel of the Fates. But it's the goofiest thing in game because you'll be
But
15 seconds, you'll hear, and then it'll just disappear.
but it's Duel of the Fates. But the one thing I remember about this game's soundtrack is really just that, boy oh boy, you'd better like Duel of the Fates, because that's just about all we got in this game. And
Yeah,
I think you get like
it's
other stingers of some pieces of the episode 1 soundtrack for like the race beginning or the race ending.
but again, it's like a second of music and then it's
Yeah.
over. And like that's the whole soundtrack. So that's clearly an aspect they didn't really put a lot of effort into for this game. And so most of the time I would say, you didn't try, I'm not going to listen. And I would turn the music off and just listen to my own stuff while playing the game.
The real insult would be turning off the in-game music, but then putting on the episode 1 soundtrack to just listen to full pieces from the deck.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember playing that game a lot. Is this one that you played with your family a lot or with your friends a lot?
Yeah. So I played this game with some of my siblings and also with, I wound um, well, I wound up playing this game primarily again near the time that it came out, but then also in college I picked it up again a little bit and enjoyed playing it quite a bit then with friends.
Yeah. There is actually a Switch re-release that came
Yep.
out somewhat recently that I saw a friend of mine streaming, and boy, it looks like an N64 game with slightly sharper textures and lines, but it made me a
Yeah,
little nostalgic.
I'm sure it's exactly the same, and I've thought about getting it, but it's like I already own it for the N64. I don't need to buy it again, you know.
Yeah.
So
All right. There's one more game on here.
yeah, if you think we have time, I can dive in.
Go for it.
All right, so this is a game that came out in the mid 1990s. It is the original Monster Rancher for the PlayStation.
I was
So
wondering what MR1 stood for.
yeah, so Monster Rancher is a game that is it's a really boring video game. If I had to give this one a genre, RPG simulator. It's
Okay.
uh, it's like you're pretending to play an RPG. So it's a really boring game, basically, but it has a really cool conceit. So first of all, this is a game that I would play. Uh, my friends and I would get together and we would play this game together, kind of take turns playing for a little while at a time. And it was a lot of fun to do. This is another game that the soundtrack is really the best, and so I would turn the music off and listen to other music,
I'm sensing a
while,
theme here.
which we're going to negate in the next section, I think.
Yeah.
But yes, that was another theme that I picked for these games that I decided to talk about here today. So, anyways, but this is another game that I play socially. So the coolest conceit of this game, another thing that led to listening to other music while playing this game, is basically it's a monster breeding game. You breed these monsters and you raise them at the ranch, and eventually you enter them in tournaments and fight them. You know, of course, because that's what you do with monsters. If Pokemon has taught us anything. Although this
Exactly.
game, yeah. So I got into this game. And the cool conceit about it is that the way you get new monsters is by taking CDs you own, compact discs of music or whatever, putting them in your PlayStation while the game is running. So while the game is running, you take out the game disc, you put in a different CD, it'll read the other CD, you take it out, you put the game disc back in, and then it'll generate a monster for you, unique based on the values on whatever CD you put in.
That is very interesting.
Yeah, it is very unusual for a disc-based for any system to take out the medium of the game during execution of the game program.
Yeah, I guess whatever code they needed to be able to read and parse the CD that you put in must have fit into the system memory, because I don't see how you do it
Yep.
any other way.
Yeah, exactly. So it was, and so it was really fun because you have your own, unique monsters from your CD collection, right? And you could say like, yeah, I got this favorite CD of whatever, right?
Yeah. So if you and your friends who live down the street from you owned the same CD and you put your copies
It
of the
would
CD,
generate
it would generate the same monster?
Yes. Yep.
Interesting. So I have another question. Did you
Uh huh.
find using this method, which as far as I can tell is the best objective method for comparing music, have you found the objectively best album?
No. So something about this game. Everything is terrible. Like I said, this game is kind of boring. So the thing that's boring about it is you raise your monster back at the ranch, and all monsters start out bad, basically, like unusable in combat. But you try raising them, and you try to get them to do chores. Is the thing for them to then raise their stats, but they'll fail at their chores all the time and their stats won't go up. And so it's just so frustrating. You can send them on errands where they can go explore ancient ruins and stuff, but you can't actually control them in the ruins. You just have to kind of give them incentive to go and do certain things in the ruins. So, and then in combat, you also can't directly like choose what your monster does. You have to kind of suggest stuff to them, and if they have enough guts, they'll do it, and enough loyalty, they'll do it, and sometimes they'll just disobey anyway. So it's a game full of your monster disappointing you at key junctures.
You're really selling me on this game. You're
So
really
yeah, so like I said, it's kind of frustrating and kind of boring, but it's a wonderful game, and that's why I list it here. And again, it's something that I used to do all the time with friends, and we would try and really dive deep into certain types of monsters because there's like 16 or 20 something like that main breeds with sub breeds underneath there, and you can kind of develop those and learn how to use them really well. So it's a lot of fun.
okay. Interesting. I From a purely technical point, I would love to dive into the code of that game and see how it works, but that is for another time. Um,
Yes.
are there any other games that didn't make this list that you would want to give a brief mention to?
Eh, nah. I mean, this is enough for now.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll talk about some of the games from which we're going to play some music. So maybe we'll spend our time doing that.
Yeah.
All right, so we are going to move on to sort of the meat of the episode, where I think we're going to spend the most time, which is interesting because we've been going for about 40 minutes so far.
It's a long
Um,
time.
well, like I said before we started, you're a verbose guest, and that is good because that means more stuff to listen to. So let's actually listen to some music. So again, like the video game question, I asked Sam to pick out some of his favorite video game music. This isn't a top five. This isn't in any particular order. This is just some of his favorite music. So let's get started with the first song on this list. What do you have for us first?
The first song on the list is K. Rool Returns from Donkey Kong Country 2, Diddy's Quest by David Y.
It's so interesting to me that this is not Diddy Kong's quest, but Diddy's Kong quest.
Puns, you gotta love them.
I like that. All right, so here is K. Rool Returns. All right, and that's all we got for that song. I'm gonna play it one more time and kind of fade it down as we talk over it, just to
Okay.
leave the accreditation up. Um, what do you like about this track? What makes you include it in this short list here?
So the reason I included it in my short list here is because it has some serious personal. So it has a personal significance to me, which is this is the first video game I ever owned, and so that has informed this a little bit. But I think that it's a very effective piece for what it's aiming to do. So this is the
Mhm.
piece that plays when you basically boot up the game. So you turn on the game, and the way that it works is instead of presenting you with an opening animatic, credits, or like a main title screen where you can switch between options or something, this game boots up to just a still image of the characters in the game opening a treasure chest or something like that. And this is a Donkey Kong game, but it's themed around kind of pirates and stuff.
Mhm.
Um, So and then this piece plays over that just still image for 40 seconds or however long the piece is.
Yeah.
And so I find that to be a really effective technique. It's kind of like you're opening up a storybook. So for me as a little kid, it was very analogous to like picking up a storybook or something and looking at the cover, right? And saying, oh, here's the adventure. And David Wise did a great job on this whole soundtrack, but I love this opening track. This might be one of the like earliest video game pieces of video game music I got acquainted with. It did this like emulation of orchestral instruments really well.
Mm-hmm.
And so it is a very orchestral feeling piece. You get the low brass part, and you get the flute runs, and you get the string parts, sometimes pizzicato. So you get these really nice, diverse textures in there that are also very archetypical, sort of, or stereotypical. I always get those mixed up, but it kind of like it's evoking kind of a popular theme for pirates, anyway, right? It feels like pirate music, and I don't know what elements it is that makes it do that, but
yeah, I don't know either. But so I haven't played Donkey Kong Country 2, Diddy's Kong Quest. But one of the things I was thinking of as we listened to it here is how much it reminded me of the music from Warcraft 2, which is also in its own way very piratey themed.
That game has both, right?
Yeah, so not to go off too deep into the weeds, but Warcraft 2, obviously a sequel to Warcraft 1. Its big innovation, other than just a graphical upgrade, was that it introduced naval and aerial combat to the series. And so its opening cutscene has the Orcish navy, sailing in to invade the human lands of Lordaeron. And the background music is very reminiscent of this. The brass parts, the loud percussion, like bass drums or timpanis, flying flutes parts that kind of rise over the rest. And so, I know a tiny bit about Donkey Kong and the Donkey Kong series. I didn't really know this was piratey themed, but I was already thinking pirates and naval combat and stuff. So it's really cool that it kind of evokes that. And this is a really cool, leaving aside the basic point I just talked for a minute to say it reminds me of Warcraft 2. It's a good piece. It's interesting, it's fun, it's evocative. It kind of gets my imagination going. It's very adventurous.
Yep, it does what it set out to do.
Yeah, and it does it really well. So that's cool. Did you play a lot of Donkey Kong Country 2? You said this was the first game you owned. Did you play it to the ground?
I don't know. Maybe. I don't have particular memories of playing this game like a ton. I mean, I owned it, so I played it a lot, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, it is a game I played a lot. I like it a lot.
Cool. Yeah, I remember the first couple games I owned, I would pretty much just play on repeat. I don't know if I ever beat them, but as soon as I died, I just...
Yeah, the next game in this list is one that I've maybe played a lot more. So,
all right, maybe that's a good segue. Let's move on. What is the next game, and what is the next piece we're going to play?
Yes, the next game or the next piece is Gravity Beetle from Mega Man X3. So, by Kinuyo Yamashita.
All right. So why don't we'll play this piece and then we'll fade it down and we'll talk about it.
Sure.
All right. So here is Gravity Beetle. All right, I believe that's hit the loop. Those sirens were not a part of the track, right?
No, that's outside my window.
All right, so that was Gravity Beetle from Mega Man X3. Um,
Yeah,
tell us what you like about this piece.
it's rock and roll, man. It's so
It's
cool.
rock and roll.
Yeah, so the Mega Man music, the music in particular, is always got this really cool factor to it, you know. And so as a kid playing through these games, the music from the Mega Man X series of games is really appealing, and just that's a constant throughout the series. And It's frequently rock music, but it's kind of unusual in a lot of ways. I think it like you don't hear rock songs on the radio that sound like this, you know.
No, yeah.
But another thing about this song, and the reason I put this song on there, so a number of other songs from the Mega Man X series, is that this one's kind of personally significant to me in a particular way. When I was in high school and was starting to learn to play guitar, this was the first video game song that I ever loaded up into a MIDI editor to try and figure out how to play on my guitar.
Okay.
The particular MIDI of it that I found, maybe in the original soundtrack here, but I was expecting it to be like power chords in the back for the rhythm guitar part.
Yeah.
It was not written as power chords. It's all these like different chord inversions and stuff.
Oh my god.
And as a novice guitarist, there was no way I could understand what was going on, and so I never successfully learned how to play this song. But
did you at least learn the lead part?
No, because again at the time I couldn't envision myself doing that either. I was like, I can do power chords, I can do the background, but that did not work out.
Yeah, that's about the level of guitar that I'm at. So I could play power chords, but I guess this one would also similarly elude me. Yeah, I mean, this is like you said, my first impressions when I was loading this piece up to kind of get my streaming software ready was like, yep, this is Mega Man music. It's rock and roll. It's fast. It's exciting. It's good. It's got like a singing melody that's sort of played on what you can interpret as an electric guitar.
Yep, exactly. You can feel it as an electric guitar for the lead melody, but it's also very singable, and so you can remember it and sing along with it constantly, harmonize with it as you're.
Yeah.
And it's a somewhat melancholy too. I think if you were to isolate the melody away from the other instruments, I think it's kind of a sad melody. So maybe that's something for a future arrangement someday, but who knows?
Yeah, that would be really interesting because for this piece and for all the Mega Man music I'm familiar with which is mostly Mega Man 2. If you take away sort of that driving beat and the very quick rhythms, it's a completely different piece. And I'd be interested in hearing Gravity Beetle without those pieces and hearing the melody because, yeah, I think you're right. Trying to imagine it does sort of seem a little bit sad, which, I haven't played these games, but I watched you present these games on this channel over the past weeks and months. And there is a little bit of sadness in those stories and a little bit of melancholy.
Yep. Yeah, the games are frequently feature loss as one of the main elements.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a really cool piece. All right, let's move on. Let's talk about the next piece here. This one's a little bit longer and a little bit more modern. What piece is this?
Yes, it is. This is March of the Brave from I Am Setsu Tomoki Miyoshi.
All right, your mic cut out a little bit there, so I'm just going to repeat this for posterity. This is March of the Brave, and it is from the game I Am Setsuna, and the accreditation on this is Tomoki Miyoshi. Is that right?
Yep.
All right, here we go with I Am Setsuna, March of the Brave. All right, and that's the looping point.
Yep.
Tell us a little bit about I Am Setsuna. And of course, for posterity, that the piece we are listening to is March of the Brave from I Am Setsuna.
Yeah, so it's kind of a weird game. It was the second, I think, Switch game that I got, and I played it and I enjoyed the game. I can talk about the game maybe a little bit, but the piece is what kind of interests me. So the game's soundtrack is almost 100% solo piano.
Yeah.
Which is very unusual, I think, for game soundtracks.
Yeah, it's
Uh,
definitely a departure from the last two pieces that we've listened to have just
yeah,
one instrument. Although, if you're going to have just one instrument, having it be the piano is a little bit cheating, I feel. But
well, it's a traditional pick, right?
yes.
Yeah, the piano is good at playing by itself and accompanying itself and everything.
Hmm.
Uh, so, uh, but yeah, the entire game soundtrack, almost entirely, is solo piano, and I found it to be really appealing. In particular, the way that this piece is written, the melody is again very singable. I feel like, and this piece got stuck in my head constantly when I was playing this game, and so I'd be like, walking around town just singing this game in my head or out loud as I'm walking around. I love this melody. I really got into this, and it reminded me a lot, in particular, of how I learned how to play piano.
Hmm.
So I don't. I didn't list piano as an instrument that I play because I haven't really played piano frequently in years. But I learned how to play piano in college by taking a class that was piano, a historical approach.
Hmm.
It's where we kind of studied the history of piano music from the Baroque period, the late Baroque period, to modern day, and we kind of learned about the evolving technique of playing piano and how it was used, and we learned about different composers who were significant in the instrument's development, or the oeuvre, the popular oeuvre of works for the piano, and learned about those composers' particular traits and stuff. So one of the composers we studied was Bela Bartok, a Hungarian ethnomusic who collected folk songs all over Hungary and Romania, at least, probably other places as well. But he collected lots and lots of folk songs and transcribed them into. He incorporated these folk melodies into his orchestral pieces that he would write. And I love his music. His solo piano music is very noteworthy. He has anyway, I could talk about him a lot.
Yeah.
But this piece reminded me of him a little bit in that it's kind of rough. It's got this very singable melody that to me felt kind of like a folk song. And it's this solo piano piece. So it was very evocative for me of that kind of Bartok element. And it really, this was the piece that got me back and interested in arranging music again once the
Hmm.
NGSO was starting up and doing things. Because I hadn't really considered doing it myself until I really got into this piece. And it was like, man, it would be so fun if we could play this as a group.
And
So I have not
at,
yet arranged this,
yeah, I was gonna
but this
say.
is but this is the one that inspired me to start dabbling in arranging myself.
Yeah, and you've put forward a couple different arrangements, which I suppose we could have listed under. The segment is called "What instruments do you play?" but it's really sort of like, how do you participate in the NGO? So you could have listed arrangements, because I believe we've played a couple arrangements of yours, right?
I think just one. We've played How Amusing.
Okay. Which How I'm Using from Octopath Traveler is a piece that we will not be listening to today. It didn't make the shortlist cut, a little bit to my chagrin, but we got
Yeah.
some other really cool music pieces. So back to March of the Brave. Yeah, this is the first time I had heard it. Apart from the 30 seconds I had heard when setting up some of the streaming software. And this is a really powerful piece. You have written down here that you would classify it as playful, and I would almost disagree. There's kind of
Okay.
a quiet fortitude to it. It seems to speak to me of maybe someone who's a little bit young and not so sure of themselves, but they are setting out because they have some purpose that they're going to accomplish, or they have some confidence in their task. They're dutifully putting one step in front of the other. um I guess I could see how it sounds playful, but it communicated more of that, like, sort of youthful quiet confidence. um
All
I don't
right.
know if it says that to you, or if this is just
I,
different
I
interpretations.
I agree with your interpretation as well.
Yeah. A really, really cool piece. And again, solo piano is not typical for video game music. Um,
No.
back in the day, back as old as video game music gets that I still listen to, which is like NES music. I suppose you could play those soundtracks on a piano solo, and many people do, but it was never really sort of designed to do that. Whereas this soundtrack, I Am Setsuna, again, a recent game, right, within the last 5 years,
Yep. Mhm.
and so you've got to decide or think that this was intentional, and it was I haven't listened to the rest of the soundtrack, but it sounds like it was a really good choice, because
Yeah.
it really communicates something unique and special.
And it
So,
really works with the aesthetic of the game. The game takes place in a world that's, and so it's just constant
sorry,
snowscapes.
could you just quickly repeat your mic again? Cut out. This game takes
Oh,
place in a world where something.
everything is completely snowed over, so you're
Okay.
constantly in these giant, quiet snowscapes. And so to
Mm,
get just a solo piano kind of reinforces the delicate nature of the environment.
yeah, yeah, I could see that. Thinking about snowscapes again takes me back to Octopath Traveler and thinking about some of the snowy things there. And while those
Yep.
pieces aren't played on solo piano, they do sort of have that very sparse instrumentation that sort of defines them.
And they frequently use piano and other percussion instruments to do kind of lighter flourishes on the high register for this to emphasize kind of a snowy feeling.
Yeah. Well, all right. Let us move on to our next piece. This piece actually really surprised me when I started listening to it while setting up for this. What is our next piece?
Our next piece is called Heal, and it's from a game called Aiko. It was composed by Koichi.
Your mic cut out again when you gave accreditation to those two. But so just for posterity,
Okay.
Heal from the game Ico, and it is by Yamazaki Koichi and Murayama Mitsukini. Here's Ico. All right, gonna fade it down here. Let it play in the background. That is
Okay.
Heal from the game Ico. And yeah, like I said, this is what a departure from the other tracks that we've played. I'm actually gonna. I didn't realize it ended there, so I'm just gonna replay it again in the
Okay.
background as we talk about it. This this is so very different from the other tracks that we've listened to already, but really, really cool. What do you like about this? What made you decide to bring it to the table here?
Yeah, there's a lot. So this game, Ico, is a game that's very, very musically sparse, very much like Breath of the Wild. There isn't a whole lot of music in the game, and generally, when you're playing the game, this is one of the only moments when you get music, and this is the music that plays when you save your game. So it's like a moment of safety, sort of, because you save
Mm,
at these couches that you find throughout this castle, these stone couch bench things. And so it's a moment of safety and respite from the trials that you're going through on your adventure. And in that moment of respite and safety, you hear this music, and it was as I was playing the game, it was incredibly comforting. It was a really
Mhm.
interesting kind of emotional effect that this music yielded on me as I was playing the game. Musically, I really like so much about this piece aesthetically. I like the way that it feels like it's a bunch of distinct little parts, like these different instrument parts. You hear this like flute flourish or something. You hear these different percussive parts, um, and you hear these little bubbles in the background sometimes, and they're all kind of just combined together, and it feels very minimalist in some ways, right? How you have these small figures that keep getting repeated, but in maybe new combinations, make them kind of interesting. It feels like a very open and atmospheric piece, and so it invites the listener to kind of take part in the piece and maybe add in their. As I was listening to this piece while playing the game, I would frequently just sit in the save menu listening to this music and singing along my own melodies, my own parts to, add into the musical texture. The piece is very textural, the way you experience it.
Mhm.
Um, and it, in some ways, for me anyway, I found it kind of difficult to like really parse out the structure of it. Although there is a structure, but I found it kind of resisted my head's basic attempts to parse the structure. And so to me, the combination of the elements flowing in and out of each other, it felt kind of aleatoric to me. It felt slightly like random, sort of. Like
Okay.
I didn't know exactly when to expect that flute melody to come back in, or I didn't know exactly when to expect, oh, when are the bubbles going to come back, or all these different parts. And so I really liked that it's playful, it's open and inviting. It's very minimal. It's very meditative in some ways.
Yeah, all aspects which I think work really, really well for sort of a save theme or a safe room theme or a safe area theme. Um, as you described that, I was thinking about how much it reminds me of the only one I'm thinking of right now is the save room theme from Resident Evil and from Resident Evil 4, which I imagine is a very different game from Ico, but also has this concept of safe rooms, which play sort of atmospheric textural music like this. Although, even those they're not really similar to this at all. This is so, gosh, I don't know how to describe it. Some of like the electronic parts are just really, really interesting and cool, and pleasant to listen to. So yeah, I was, like I said, I was really, really impressed with this piece. Um, it's I'm gonna say this and it's gonna sound like an insult, and I don't mean it to be. It's not very interesting in that it's not very complex, and you can listen to it for about 20 seconds and feel like you've gotten it for the most part. But at the
Yep,
same time, like, I wanna listen to that for 30 minutes. I wanna listen to that for an
right,
hour because,
exactly.
you could just sort of sit in that. You brought up the term meditative. Yeah, absolutely. It's very much kind of a calming and focusing kind of effect. Um, so yeah, I really, really liked that piece. That was really cool. So thank you for cluing me into the fact that that piece exists.
Yeah, it's a good one.
All right, so we've got one more that we're going to share, and this one is a doozy. This one is one that I recognize, but Sam, it's your show, so why don't you introduce it?
This piece is called Resurrections. It's from the game Celeste, and it was composed by Lena Ray.
All right, so this is Resurrections. Just for time's sake, I'm gonna have to fade it down. Editor's note: this is nearly a 10-minute long piece, and it, as you've already heard in a couple places, it evolves as time goes on. So anyone watching this live or listening to this on YouTube, go check out the full piece. It is fantastic, and we're gonna hear it continue to evolve in the background as we talk. But talk to us a little bit about Resurrections from the game Celeste and
Yeah.
air drum.
So yeah. So this piece is great, and this plays in the second level of the game Celeste, and the theme of that level, I think, one of the themes of that level. Celeste is a game about a girl going through an emotional journey, sort of, coupled with a physical journey up a mountain. So this level plays as she begins to introspect on herself. And so there's a pivotal scene in this level where she looks in a mirror and sees her own reflection and doesn't recognize what she sees, sort of, you know? It's a very interesting device throughout the game, but I feel like this music does a great job of that for so many reasons. But I think the music feels kind of curious and kind of mysterious and unknown, while also being kind of dark, but also kind of exciting. It's just a really fun piece all around.
Yeah, especially the beginning of this game is very almost spooky, in sort of how this repeating idea of these rising notes just keeps persisting as the stuff in the background changes. And yeah, so I played through the main story of Celeste earlier this year for the first time. I remember this level, and I remember the whole game really well and being very, very impactful. And I remember, identifying a lot with the main character. I interpreted it as, her kind of tackling her own depression and maybe some of her own sort of like self-destructive thoughts and behaviors. And being able to overcome those as she climbs Celeste Mountain.
Well, it's something you mentioned is the repeating figure of rising lends itself to climbing a mountain.
Yeah. And, again, back to this piece, my favorite part hasn't even started yet. My favorite part starts about 6 minutes in. And we've only just gotten to the quiet part.
Yeah, this part is great because it's playing with the main character's theme song, which you've learned from the first level of the game. So in the first level, you learn the main theme, and then here they repeat her theme, but in a minor key.
Yeah.
Instead of major. The original is in a major key, and they repeat it in a minor key here to reflect this dark side of your main character that comes out of the mirror in this level. And so it's a really, really fun juxtaposition, and there are parts of this piece later on where it's playing the piece's melody alongside this like warped version of the main character's melody, and so you get kind of a bi-melodic segment of music, which is really fun.
Yeah. Gosh, I need to get back and play more of this game, because holy cow. I'm gonna mess up the pronunciation. Is it Lena Rain or Lena Rain?
I actually don't know. I say Lena, but I don't know.
Yeah, there's a bunch of different tracks on this soundtrack that are really good. There's a bunch that I haven't listened to because I haven't accessed those parts of the game. The track, the soundtrack or background music to the first level you mentioned, I believe, is called First Steps, and that's one of my other favorite parts. And here, the music has now kind of kicked into high gear as you get to the very exciting kind of conclusion arc of this level.
The chase sequence.
The chase sequence, and we'll maybe not describe that for anyone who wants to play the game. So yeah, again, this piece, 10 minutes long. Go listen to the whole thing on YouTube to get the full experience. And if you haven't played Celeste, it's really, really impressive, and it's absolutely worth your time. Any final thoughts you want to share on the game or on this track?
Nah, that's good.
All right. Well, unfortunately, Celeste, we're going to have to leave off maybe the most exciting parts, but that just leaves more for you to explore when you go and check out this game for yourself. So let's fade that down. And let's go on to the final section of our interview today. the section that we are calling the Instrument Petting Zoo. And this is going to be a chance for Sam to show off one or more of his instruments, kind of explain a little bit about them, maybe some of the historical background of the instrument or the historical background of how he came to like and play those instruments. And then just kind of show them off and maybe play a scale or two. And we'll be able to demonstrate kind of the flexibility of these instruments. So, which of your instruments are you going to be sharing with us today?
I figure at most I should show off the
Your microphone cut off again. At most, you should show off the what?
oboe and the bassoon.
All right. So, which one do you want to start with, the oboe or the bassoon?
Let's start with the oboe.
All right.
So the oboe is comprised of a few different joints. You can take it apart. This bottom joint down here is called the bell. And the oboe and the bassoon are both double reed instruments, which means that I'm not sure if this will come out on camera, but it means you play it mouthpiece that looks like this. That's a piece of wooden reed that is folded in on itself. So there's two layers of it here. And double reed players tend to use little like cups to wet their reeds, keep them wet. So anyways, did I pick up the right one? Yeah. So that's what an oboe is in real short order.
Okay.
And it sounds kind of like this. Well. Missed my C. Oops.
Can't believe it. Well, okay. So I see a lot of buttons and levers on there. What do those buttons and levers do?
Yes. That's a great question, Mike. So, you depress different ones to get different fingerings. There are holes underneath these, right? This instrument traditionally is made of wood, and there's just different holes that impact the pitch, and so the buttons cover up the different holes to change the pitch of the instrument, to change the pitch of the note you're playing through. And there's a lot of different alternate fingerings and stuff on here. So frequently there will be two keys that do the exact same thing, but depending on what other notes you're fingering around them, you might need one key instead of the other one.
Okay. So like if you needed to reach things maybe further down towards the bell, you'd have a different sort of hand position, but you'd still need to press buttons up near the top and something like that.
Well, yeah. So one example of that is there's this key right here which makes an A flat. This is like your A flat key.
Okay.
But if you're using, and you hit this with your pinky of your left hand, but if you're using your pinky of your left hand to hit one of these other four keys right here, then you can't switch very quickly to hit this key. So there's a right hand A flat key as well, which is on the side here.
Okay. And so yeah, that's really interesting. Is there one that you're supposed to use over the other?
The traditional one is the pinky, and the right-hand one is considered the alternate fingering.
Okay. That's really interesting, having alternate ways to play the same note.
Yeah,
which I guess
there's a whole lot
shouldn't
of
be that surprising to me because I play a guitar and there's several different ways to play the same note on a guitar. Approximately for at most six for six different strings.
Yep.
So okay. What is the lowest note that you can play on the oboe?
The oboe can go down. So the oboe can go down to the B flat below the treble clef. So let me scale down there.
Okay.
From the B flat in the treble clef.
All right. Something on your end is not very happy with your microphone, as it decided that everything after the second note was noise. So could you try one more time?
Yes.
Yeah, it cut off the tail end of it again. Okay. The bassoon goes down to a low B flat, and if I'm remembering correctly, would that be the B flat below middle C?
The oboe, yes. The oboe goes down to the B flat below. Yeah, the oboe goes down to the B flat below middle C.
Okay.
Yeah, just below the treble clef.
What's the highest note that the oboe can reach?
I actually don't know. So I am not a very advanced oboist. So the highest note that I can play off the top of my head. I've played higher notes, but I don't have them memorized. The highest note that I can play off the top of my head is the D above the treble clef, and that note is kind of considered the high end for like non-advanced oboe players.
Okay. Could you demonstrate it as much as your microphone will allow you?
I will try.
All right. Yeah.
So that note is all the way up here.
All right. So we got
Yeah.
we got a little bit of it before your microphone. I don't understand. Your microphone has kind of been doing that all night, just deciding to cut you off at random times, and it doesn't appear to be linked to when you get loud or when you get quiet. It just decides, nope, we're done. Uh, which is weird
Weird.
and unfortunate. But okay, so the oboe can get quite high, and that low note
Yes.
we didn't really hear, but it's definitely not super down into the bass range. Oh, there we heard it. See, I don't know, I don't get it. So it's definitely got quite a range on it. I think you noted down
You
here.
know, you say that, but actually the oboe has a very small range compared to almost any other instrument.
Well, look, I'm
The
just
oboe,
making stuff up here. I don't know anything about music, so
yeah, the oboe's range is significantly smaller than many of the other woodwind instruments, like the flute or the clarinet.
okay. Um, why did you decide to start playing the oboe?
Uh, well, I moved to a new school and they didn't have an orchestra. I'd been playing the cello at my previous school. They didn't have an orchestra at my new school, and they said, "Well, you have to learn to play a band instrument. Which one do you want to play?" And he was naming all of them, and he got to oboe, and I said, "That's a funny name. I'll play that instrument."
You know, as good a reason as any. Um,
Right? so so that's how I started to play the oboe.
how old were you at the time?
I was 9.
Okay, so yeah, 9 years old, picking the instrument with a funny name, it tracks.
Yep.
Um, is there anything else you'd like to demonstrate on the oboe before we move on to the bassoon?
I think I can come back to this if I need to.
Okay, so show off. Why don't you pick up the bassoon and show it off as much as we can on camera?
Yeah. So this is the bassoon again. I showed it off, but most bassoons strap here. So
Okay.
it's you put this piece of fabric on your chair and you sit on it, and that's how you anchor the instrument in place. Some people use neck straps with bassoons as well, but I don't do that. So the bassoon is also a double reed instrument. It's got a much bigger reed than the oboe, but
Okay.
it's the same idea. The sound you make on a double reed when it's not playing on an instrument is called a croak.
A croak.
And if
Okay.
it, yep,
I can
and
I
if
can
a
see
double
how it
reed,
got that name.
yep, and if it has a good croak, that means it's probably a good reed.
So does this
So,
reed have a good croak?
it's okay. Yeah, it's okay.
All right, so
So
play a little bit
the
of the bassoon
bassoon.
for us. All right. Oh, we got the beginning and we got the end.
Oh, all right.
Bassoon, a much lower instrument. This plays in the bass clef, right?
Yep, it does.
Okay. Um, why don't you show off some of the levers and buttons that you can press to change things?
So the exciting thing about the bassoon is mostly on the back. So it has a lot of thumb. So I don't know how clear this is, but there are like on my bassoon there are 8 different thumb keys for the left hand, and for the right hand there are 4 different thumb keys. My
Now,
bassoon is quite. Oh yeah,
now I don't know about you, but I only have 2 thumbs, and you just listed
yeah.
12 buttons.
Exactly. So there's a whole lot of different ones that you're supposed to manage with your thumbs, which makes that kind of the most fun part of bassoon fingering, I think.
Okay. Are there buttons and levers for the rest of your fingers to press, or is it all thumb control?
Well, I guess there are. I don't know. Again, I don't know how visible this is. I might need to detach my seat strap here. Yeah. So, but there's a whole bunch on the front as well, including a bunch for your pinkies, for your right pinky, and then for your ring finger, and then up here. I guess these are just holes on mine. But then there are pinky keys up here as well for your left pinky.
Okay.
So
So quite a lot
yeah. So
going on a bassoon and an oboe.
Yes.
Okay. What is the lowest note that we can play on the bassoon?
It is the B flat below the bass clef, which I already played a little bit here, but
Yes, quite a ringing note. Kind of a blasty kind of note. Okay.
yes.
And you have down here an interesting note that I do not understand. In filling out this agenda, I asked Sam to say, play the lowest note. He says B flat on bassoon, and then in parentheses, we could use construction paper to make it an A. So tell me
Yeah,
how that
so
works.
the top joint of this, right? So the top joint of the bassoon is the bell right here,
Okay.
and the bell only has one hole on it, which you can see is manipulated by this thing right here. And this is the hole, or this is, and if you cover this, you can hit the lowest note on the instrument, which kind of means that like the length of the bell determines how low that lowest note is.
Okay.
So, a technique that bassoonists have used to extend the range from a B flat to an A or even lower is to extend the length of the bell somehow. And I
Okay.
have done this in the past by literally using construction, rolling up construction paper and sticking it into the bell of the instrument, and that effectively lowers the final note.
That must be interesting to get the tuning right.
Yeah, you have to be a little bit careful and height wise as you go.
Yeah.
And there are pre-manufactured inserts you can put into the bell to lower the note by specific
People
amounts as
have
well.
pre-cut construction paper for you?
They use plastic or other, yes.
Okay. So if you extend the length of the bell, we can lower the lowest note down to an A. Do all the buttons still work to manipulate the pitch? Or are they all sort of shifted down
Yep.
by a half step?
Nope. Nope. Just the lowest note.
Interesting. That's very interesting. Okay. What is the highest note that the bassoon can play?
So the highest note I'm comfortable hitting is 3 octaves higher B flat. So just to run through all my B flats here.
That's low B flat. That sure is four different B flats. Um,
Yeah, so that's the highest note that I'm comfortable playing on the bassoon. Again, because I'm not a very advanced player. The bassoon can go much higher than that. Um, and in fact, that's one thing I wanted to bring up about both the oboe and the bassoon. My instruments are a little bit old, and technology on these instruments has continued to evolve in recent decades. And so there are new keys and new mechanisms getting added on to both these instruments in the modern day to expand their range. Uh, yeah.
Yeah, that's actually really interesting to me. I mentioned earlier that I have no really formal music education or formal music history education. And so, my sort of naive impression of what I would call classical or orchestral instruments, which is already probably the incorrect term. But my impression of those instruments is that they were invented 500 years ago and haven't really changed since then. But you just noted that technology on oboes and bassoons is evolving today, not just in the last 50 years or in the last 100 years, but in the last decade, 2 decades. You'd say these things are changing.
Yep. Yeah, the institution of classical music is by nature kind of resistant to, large changes, right? And so that's why like the saxophone is only a partially adopted instrument, right? The saxophone was invented in the mid 19th century, but isn't fully adopted by symphony orchestras, right?
Mhm.
So the number of orchestral pieces with saxophones is still somewhat limited, right? Which creates issues for us as an orchestra because there's some arrangers that we get music from who always leave out saxophones.
Yeah.
And so we have to rearrange their parts a little bit to make saxophone parts.
And for whatever reason, we have almost the opposite problem of these arrangers. We have a lot of saxophonists, or have
Well, yeah,
traditionally
it's
had a lot
it's
of
a
saxophone.
yeah, the saxophone is a very useful instrument, right?
Mhm.
And so it's been in use in a lot of different musical groups, but the institution of music of classical music has been resistant. So anyway, there are difficulties in changing a lot of the instruments, but there is progress, as you mentioned.
Yeah. So we learned a little bit about why you chose the oboe. It had a funny name. When did you first
Yep.
pick up the bassoon, and what led you to the bassoon?
I was basically just directed into it by my band director. The same one who I started with the oboe under. Eventually, he said, "Hey, you play a double reed instrument. How about you start playing bassoon instead?" And that was it. I
Okay.
wound up playing bassoon as my primary instrument through high school, and I really fell in love with this instrument. So
If you had to pick favorites, and you
it's the
feel
bassoon.
it's the bassoon. There you go. All right, easy peasy. What do you like about the bassoon over the oboe?
It's got a much wider range. First of all,
Okay.
much wider range, which allows you to play these different feelings and dynamics. Right. So the bassoon is it's an instrument that's very characterized in a lot of different ways. People associate it with is it the from Fantasia? Is it Sorcerer's Apprentice?
Yeah, I think so.
Um,
Yeah.
so there are a lot of the bassoon is a very characterful instrument, but it's got a very beautiful high range as well that is very lyrical and kind of feels like a human voice singing a little bit. I don't know. It's just a very fun instrument to play.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, it's just speaking from personal experience, it's a lot of fun hearing that kind of sound come out of that instrument and contribute to the different pieces that we play. I know that for the handful, well, really for the one piece I arranged, which was a Metroid medley, we found a pretty cool use for the bassoon in that, and I really enjoyed the sound that we got out of that. Um, and then, for all the other pieces that we play, I obviously really enjoy your contributions as well. Well, is there anything else you'd like to share about the bassoon and the oboe?
Um, I could play through like maybe a melody in two different registers on the bassoon or something to give like a character idea for it. Is that
Yeah, as
reasonable?
much again, as much as your microphone will allow,
Oh yeah,
we'll
forgot
we'll
about that.
we'll see if it gets picked up. It's weird because when we tried this, before going live, it was fine. I heard pretty much everything you were saying, and then sort of as the night went on, it started cutting out more and more. But yeah, let's try and listen to a short little melody on the bassoon.
Yeah, if it works, it works. If it doesn't, oh well.
Yeah.
So I'll try it in two different registers. So. So
Yeah.
yeah, just to
Unfortunately,
give
we
a
lost a lot of that. But we
oh
got
well.
we got little pieces of it. So hopefully people kind of got an impression of what this instrument sounds like. Hey, maybe this is an opportunity to say check out some of the other videos on the Norwalk Gamer Symphony Orchestra YouTube channel. We've got recordings of some of our past performances, and we've got a recording of an ensemble we did over Discord. And so you can check out how Sam's bassoon sounds, how Sam's oboe sounds, and all the other instruments that we don't have time to go through the whole petting zoo spiel with tonight. Um, Sam, I'm really sorry that we had some technical issues with capturing everything you were saying and everything you were demonstrating. But thank you so much for coming and talking with me about music. This is something that you and I do offline all the time, but I think it was a lot of
Right.
fun
Yeah.
to talk about it here on Twitch, and then obviously the recording going on YouTube.
Yeah. Thank you for hosting this, Mike.
Any final closing thoughts you want to share?
I don't know. Nah, nothing.
All right. Well, I'll just close this out by mentioning once again we are the Norwalk Gamer Symphony Orchestra. We have a website. It is down that way, down below Sam, norwalkgso.org. Go check out that website. You will find links to our Instagram account, obviously the Twitch channel that we streamed this on, our YouTube, where you may be watching this after the fact, and all sorts of information about who we are, how you could join if you're local to the Norwalk area, and all sorts of fun things like that. So make sure you check that out. But for now, this has been Sam. I'm Mike, and I think that's it for our second episode of Choose Your Character. We'll be back in approximately 2 weeks with the next person we're going to interview, and it's going to be a fun time. I hope to see you all there. Thank you so much. Have a good night, everyone.
Good night.